This is HFY Vanguard stories where the universe learns never bet against humans. And this lesson starts now.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness.
The hover's engines coughed like a dying man's last prayer, each sputter rattling through the cracked console like bones shaken in a gambler's cup. Jake Coyote Miller slammed his fist against the dashboard, and the battered machine his machine answered with a low, resentful whine. The display flickered in epileptic bursts, cycling between static green lines of code and the inevitable blaring of his AI navigator's voice. In 500 feet, Gloria announced in her maddeningly cheerful tone, "Turn left into almost certain death." Jake grimaced. "Shut your digital mouth, Gloria." His drawl was sandpaper rough, equal parts exhaustion and stubborn defiance. He jerked the steering column to the right, sending the freight hover into a bone-rattling slide across irradiated sand dunes. Heat shimmered around the vehicle like waves of invisible fire, the desert stretching out in ochre infinity. Gloria, unfazed, recalculated. Rerouting. New trajectory ensures confrontation with reality will only be delayed by 27 minutes. Jake snorted, tugging the brim of his sweat-stained hat lower to block the blazing twin suns overhead. "There ain't no oasis that way, and you damn well know it." Levantis, a planet that had once been promised as a second Eden. Terraforming half-finished abandoned when the money ran dry, then claimed by scavengers, warlords, and desperate colonists too stubborn to leave. Now it was a wasteland of broken promises, where water was more precious than gold, and the sands themselves could swallow a man whole. 3 days out from Rust Springs, 2 days until Salvation Point. His water meter mocked him with a needle barely above critical. Enough for one man barely if he stopped sweating. Fat chance of that in a furnace that cooked the air to shimmering glass. Jake shifted in his seat, sweat-carving runnels down the back of his neck, and scanned the horizon through the hover's cracked windshield. That was when he saw it, a plume of dust rising against the horizon, faint at first, but unmistakable. Movement. And out here, movement always meant something: Raiders Guild patrols, scavengers, smugglers, or worse. Jake's hand drifted to the plasma rifle wedged between the seats. Its power cell hummed faintly, a comforting purr in a world that offered no comfort. His knuckles tightened around the grip. Proximity alert, Gloria chimed with mock enthusiasm. Multiple hover signatures detected. Recommendation: immediate course correction to avoid. "I got eyes," Jake cut her off. The dust plume resolved into shapes, sleek shadows sliding across the desert floor like predatory sharks. 5 hovers, military grade by their glide and formation. They moved with speed and precision, kicking up secondary trails behind them. Something else dragged in their wake. At first, just a smear in the dust, then clearer, a body tethered to the lead hover by a rope that snapped taut, dragging through sand and rock. Jake narrowed his eyes, breath catching despite the heat. The figure was female, he could tell by the outline, even through the distortion of heat mirages. Purple skin gleamed where sunlight hit raw flesh, and a shock of impossible pink hair whipped in the wind like a war banner. Alive. Not just alive fighting, even bound, even dragged across the desert at lethal speeds, she writhed, twisted, clawed at the sand with hands and feet refusing to go limp. Jake's stomach clenched. He knew who rode those hovers. He saw the emblem splashed across the lead vehicle's prow, a blood-red scorpion stenciled onto steel. Captain Ferris Malin, the Reaper himself. Levantis Executioner. A man who ruled through fear, cruelty, and the simple truth that he was strong enough to make fear into law. Jake's foot eased off the accelerator. "Not your fight, Miller," he muttered. "Not your problem. The Guild didn't pay for heroics. They paid for deliveries. 40 tons of protein paste and terraforming supplies in his cargo hold, and every pound worth its weight in water." But the woman screamed, and the scream carried across the desert like thunder. A raw, defiant sound, half curse, half battle cry. Even being dragged at 40 miles per hour, she had enough spite to hurl insults that mixed trade common with something guttural and alien. She damned the Reaper's lineage in 3 languages, questioned the functionality of his cybernetics in another, and invented a new vocabulary of hatred on the spot. Jake's hover slowed to a crawl. Gloria noticed before he did. Warning: current trajectory intersects with ongoing homicide. Course deviation not recommended. It's not homicide, Jake said, though his voice had gone dry. It's an execution. Different thing entirely. But his hands had already turned the wheel. The convoy had slowed, circling like predators savoring the kill. The Reaper's style. Draw it out. Make it brutal. Make it public. Make it a lesson. The woman's body tumbled in their wake, limp, now a doll discarded after play. Then the rope snapped with a sound like gunfire. Physics took over. Her body cartwheeled through the air, a purple and pink comet, arcing across the horizon before slamming into the hardpan directly in Jake's path. His hover's proximity alarm shrieked. Jake stood on the brakes. Anti-grav units whined, protesting the sudden demand, while 60 tons of freight threatened to ignore physics entirely. The hover skidded gravel and sand, spraying in twin fountains. When it finally groaned to a stop, Jake found himself 3 feet from her face. She opened one eye, brilliant gold like molten sunlight, and spoke through split lips. "Your timing sucks, human." Jake stared down at her. "Lady, you just became a speed bump in my delivery schedule." He popped the cabin sill, hot air rushing in like an oven door opening. The smell of burned ozone, blood, and sand hit him. He stepped out, boots crunching on irradiated grit, and looked down at the alien sprawled before him. Purple skin marbled with bruises, darker indigo patches blossoming across her ribs and shoulders. Pink hair, once radiant, was matted with blood and dust. Glowing lines traced across her arms and collarbone, pulsing faintly like dying neon tubes. She tried to push herself up, failed, settled for flipping him the middle finger. "Just run me over," she rasped. "Better than letting those bastards have the satisfaction." Jake looked up. The Reaper's convoy had noticed their missing prize. 5 hovers peeled around in perfect formation, engines roaring as they bore down on him like a hammer falling. He had 30 seconds, maybe 40. The smart move was obvious: climb back into Betsy, gun the throttle, and leave the purple woman to her fate. Deliver his cargo, collect his pay, drink water in the shade, and forget this ever happened. Simple math. But math didn't weigh the way her golden eyes bored into him, burning with fury and worse hope. Jake spat into the sand. Ah, hell. He crouched, sliding an arm under her shoulders. She was taller than he expected, easily 6 feet of alien Amazon, but impossibly light, like her bones were made of something stronger and stranger than human steel. "Can you walk?" he asked. She coughed blood. "Can you fly?" Fair enough. Jake dragged her toward the hover's loading ramp, half carrying, half dragging, ignoring the way his muscles screamed against her dead weight. She muttered something in her alien tongue, a cascade of syllables sharp as broken glass. "You got a name, or should I just call you Roadkill?" Jake grunted. She lifted her head, swayed, and whispered, "Tiamaticus Alorna, of the 9th Variance Keeper of the Obsidian Pools." Voice of the she nearly collapsed again. "Call me Tiona. Easier for your tiny human brain." Charming. Jake dumped her unceremoniously among the crates and slammed the ramp shut. By the time he returned to the cabin, the Reaper's lead hover had pulled alongside, close enough for Jake to see the pilot's augmented eyes gleam red in the sun. And there, framed in the open doorway of his war machine, stood Captain Ferris, the Reaper Malin, a half-man, half-machine nightmare. One hand gripped the hover's roll cage. The other rested casually on the sawn-off plasma cannon at his hip. The mechanical half of his face gleamed servos, whirring as he smiled. "Well, well," the Reaper's voice carried across the void between them, modulated and amplified until it made Jake's bones rattle. "Coyote Miller. Didn't figure you for the heroic type." Jake tightened his grip on the steering wheel, sweat dripping down his brow. "Just trying to make a delivery. Captain, found some trash in the road. You know how it is." The Reaper's augmented eye zoomed audibly, focusing on the cargo hold. "That trash," he said, "is property of the Desert Court. Sentenced to execution. Hand her over, and we'll call this a misunderstanding." From the cargo bay, Tiona's voice rang out. "Lawful? You wouldn't know lawful if it crawled up your ass and filed paperwork." Jake winced. She always this diplomat. "She's been like that 3 days now." One of the Reaper's men shouted back, laughter cruel and sharp. Jake's stomach sank. This wasn't random. This was execution. And by the look in Reaper's eyes, it was personal. The desert heat pressed down like judgment. Jake's hand slid toward the gearshift. His rifle lay within reach. Not his fight, not his problem. But those golden eyes haunted him, even unseen, glowing in the back of his mind. Jake took a breath that tasted of dust and inevitability. "Glory," he muttered. "What are the odds if I make a run for it?" "Statistically insignificant," the AI replied. Jake grinned, teeth flashing white against dust-stained skin. "Good, I like those odds." He slammed the gearshift into reverse. The hover lurched backward with a groan that sounded almost like protest. Sand erupted behind the freight vehicle as its engines howled against inertia. Jake's hands locked white-knuckle tight on the steering yoke. Plasma bolts split the air in electric shrieks, sizzling past the windshield. The Reaper's men opened fire, testing his resolve with a wall of light and death. Inside the cargo hold, Tiona shouted over the roar of engines. "Is this your plan? Run away." "Because it doesn't look like a plan. Human, it looks like panic." "Panic keeps you alive," Jake muttered, though sweat glistened on his brow. He yanked the hover sideways, sending the cargo beast into a sliding arc that made every crate inside shift and groan. The smell of ozone and hot metal filled the cabin. Through the cracked rear window, he glimpsed Tiona dragging herself upright against the freight's bulkhead. Even battered and bleeding, her presence radiated something more than survival. She was defiance made flesh, gold eyes burning like twin suns, pink hair ragged, but still proud, purple skin streaked with bruises that told a story of resilience. The Reaper's convoy split formation. Two hovers flanked wide cutting arcs like wolves circling prey. The lead vehicle stayed close, shadowing Jake's every desperate maneuver. And there always visible was Ferris Malin himself, his mechanical face catching sunlight in gleams that felt like accusations. "Coyote Miller, TM." The Reaper's voice crackled through loudspeakers, smooth as oil poured over knives. "You've got no stake in this. Hand her over. Walk away. Keep your cargo. Live another day." Jake's jaw worked, chewing at words he didn't want to say. The smart answer was obvious. "Sure, Captain. She's all yours." But he kept his silence muscles locked, eyes scanning for any gap in the tightening noose. Beside him, Gloria piped up. "Warning, probability of survival continues to approach 0. Would you like to recalculate your life choices?" "Not now," Jake growled. But Tiona heard. She laughed, a sound like glass breaking and fire catching, half pain and half triumph. "Your machine is right, human. You should have left me to D. That's what everyone else does." Jake risked a glance back at her. "Lady, you've got a real gift for gratitude." Her smile, bloodied but unbroken, was sharp enough to cut steel. "Better than lying about who you are. You're no freight runner. Not really. No man drives into hell with his eyes open unless he's looking for trouble." The words needled him. She wasn't wrong, and that made it worse. The lead hover pulled closer. Jake could see details now: red paint slashed with battle scars, the scorpion insignia burning like a brand of death. Reaper leaned casually against the door frame, plasma cannon dangling from his cybernetic arm as if it weighed nothing. His organic eye glittered with cruel amusement. "You think this is noble?" Reaper called out. "She's a thief, a traitor, seditionist scum. Her kind has stolen more water than you've ever seen in your miserable life." "That's true," Jake muttered half to himself. Tiona's answer was a ragged cough. "If I had stolen enough water, Captain Smiles back there wouldn't still be king of the sandpile." She spat purple blood onto the deck, defiantly staining Jake's freight. "Don't listen to him, human. He lies like he breathes." Jake's gut twisted. Every instinct screamed to let go, to cut his losses before the desert made a corpse of him. But every time he glanced at her, at those molten gold eyes daring the universe to break her, his grip on the wheel tightened. The Reaper must have sensed hesitation. His augmented voice dropped lower, intimate, despite the roar of engines. "Jake, I'll make it simple. Give her to me, and I'll forget this moment. No black mark, no bounty, no reason for you to look over your shoulder the rest of your life. Hand her over, and you can walk away clean." For a heartbeat, Jake let himself imagine it. The cool shade of a bar in Rust Springs, a glass of clean water sweating in his hand, a job well done, cargo delivered, credits stacked enough to keep him moving for months. And in that fantasy, Tiona's voice cut like a blade. He started with my mother. The words yanked Jake back to reality, harsher than a slap. What? Her eyes burned fierce even through exhaustion. The Reaper. He killed my mother first, dragged her just like me, made her last 6 days before the rope gave out. I am the last of her line. He wants me to finish the show. Something cold slid down Jake's spine. He looked at the Reaper again, searching for denial, but found only that mechanical smile. Cruel, certain, proud of it. Gloria interrupted, oblivious to morality. Recommendations surrender passenger to hostile forces. Calculated outcome improves personal survival by 94%. Jake's hand slipped down to the gear shift, then to the red switch beneath the dash. The one he had sworn never to touch. Here's the thing, Captain, he said, a voice dropping into the slow cadence of every outlaw he'd ever admired in long-forgotten movies. My manifest says I'm hauling 40 tons of protein paste and terraforming supplies. Doesn't say nothing about purple women or desert justice, and unless you've got paperwork proving otherwise. Reaper laughed, and the sound was a grinding symphony of broken gears. Paperwork, boy, you've been gone too long. Out here, I am the paperwork. His men raised weapons, plasma rifles charged with a whine that set Jake's teeth on edge. Projectile guns clicked like hammers of judgment. One lunatic even brandished a harpoon launcher, the cable coiled like a serpent ready to strike. Jake counted 12 barrels pointed his way. 12 reasons to run. Through the rear window, he caught one more glimpse of Tiona. Bruised, battered, but still standing. Golden eyes filled with something far more dangerous than fury. Trust. Well, shit, Jake muttered. His palms slammed down on the red switch. The hover roared as hidden modifications awoke from their slumber. Panel-shifted vents snapped open, and the wheezing freight beast suddenly remembered its bloodline military surplus retrofitted and disguised as a hauler. Engines howled with feral joy. Betsy wasn't just a cargo hover. She was an old war dog, teeth still sharp, growling for a fight. The sudden surge hurled Jake against his seat, acceleration clawing at his chest. Plasma bolts lit the air, but Betsy danced sideways, slipping between beams with impossible agility. Chaff dispensers fired vomiting metallic snow into the desert sky. Targeting systems blinked and failed. Gloria's voice remained maddeningly calm. Defensive measures activated. Chance of survival still statistically insignificant. Nobody asked you. Jake spun the wheel, sending the hover into a sideways drift that carved a scar across the hardpan. The Reaper's formation scattered, trying to close the net, but Betsy punched through like a mad bull through paper walls. An explosion bloomed at his starboard side, rocking the hover, rattling teeth in his skull. Warning lights strobed across the console like a twisted Christmas tree. Warning, Gloria intoned. Catastrophic systems failure likely. Jake bared his teeth. Not today. He yanked the hover forward straight into open desert, leaving chaos in his wake. In the mirrors, he caught one last glimpse of the Reaper mechanical face, twisted in rage, plasma cannon glowing with murderous promise. Distance swallowed the convoy, but Jake knew this wasn't victory. It was only the beginning. The desert did not forgive. It did not wait. The moment Jake thought he'd slipped free, the horizon betrayed him. Dust plumes bloomed again, rising like ghosts from the earth. The Reaper's convoy, thou scattered, was relentless. 5 hovers, engines howling with predatory hunger, bent on closing the distance. Jake's hands gripped the wheel until his knuckles bleached white. The freight hover, Betsy rattled beneath him, half furious, half jubilant, to be pushed beyond her years. Warning lights winked like angry eyes across the dashboard. Proximity, alert, Gloria sang sweetly. Hostiles reacquiring. Suggestion spontaneous self-combustion may be more merciful. Jake ignored her. His eyes flicked from the rearview screen to the horizon ahead. Sand stretched infinite, broken only by jagged ridges of glassy obsidian where ancient weapons had melted the ground. It was no place to run a freight hover. It was exactly where he had to go. Behind him in the cargo hold came a cough, then a voice hoarse but stubborn. You're terrible at this. Jake barked a humorless laugh. You're welcome, by the way. Tiona was dragging herself up again, each motion defying gravity and agony alike. She leaned against a crate, tattoos along her arms, flickering faintly like a neon sign refusing to die. You can't outrun him, she said, voice low but sharp. Not in this desert. He knows it like his own shadow. Jake's eyes stayed fixed forward. Lady, I've been outrunning shadows my whole damn life. Another plasma bolt sizzled past close enough to rattle the hull. The impact scorched sand into glass beside him. Jake flinched, pulling Betsy into a desperate slide that threw him against the harness. Tiona staggered forward, bracing against the bulkhead. Open the side hatch. Jake snapped his gaze to the rear monitor. Are you insane? Do you want to live? He swore loudly, then hit the release. The side hatch cracked open, desert winds screaming inside like an angry heat and dust blasted through the cabin. Tiona pressed her palms against the hatch frame. The tattoos across her body pulsed brighter, shifting from faint glimmers to steady golden fire. She closed her eyes, and for a moment the chaos of battle bent around her will. The sand stirred. No, not stirred, moved. Threads of dust twisted into spirals, rising into miniature vortices. Plasma bolts struck the whirling grit, and fizzled trajectories bent astray. Jake's mouth went dry. The hell are you doing? Tiona opened her eyes. Golden light spilled out. Cheating death again. The Reaper's men fired blindly, plasma cutting through smoke and sand but hitting nothing vital. Betsy howled through the maelstrom, skidding and clawing at the desert floor, every bolt that missed by inches adding years to Jake's nerves. For a heartbeat, two hope flared. Then the sky darkened. Jake squinted upward. The horizon itself seemed to blur, rolling toward them like a living wall. A sandstorm, massive and merciless, barreled across Levantis with all the subtlety of a charging titan. "Oh, hell," Jake muttered. Gloria chimed in. "New environmental hazard detected. Classification catastrophic. Survival probability 0. "Starting to think you've got a drinking problem with statistics," Jake snarled. The storm slammed into them like a tidal wave made of knives. Sand clawed at metal, pounded against the windshield, and shrieked through every seam in Betsy's battered hull. Visibility dropped to nothing. Jake might as well have been steering blindfolded in a hurricane. Tiona staggered, clinging to the bulkhead. Her glowing tattoos dimmed under the storm's fury, their light smothered by suffocating grit. "Keep straight," she shouted, voice barely audible. "If you veer, the storm eats you." "Not exactly reassuring," Jake shouted back. Lightning crackled within the storm, purple-white veins splitting the sky. Thunder rolled deep and hungry. Sand fused into glass where bolts struck. Every breath scorched Jake's lungs, filtered through the hover's failing systems. Shapes loomed in the swirling dust, hulking silhouettes of enemy hovers, ghost-like and fleeting. Plasma fire erupted in bursts, brief suns in the storm, but no aim held steady. Chaos reigned. Jake gritted his teeth, coaxing every ounce of power from Betsy's straining engines. The old war dog roared, her hidden boosters screaming with each thrust. She was alive, furious, refusing to die quiet. One of the Reaper's hovers veered too far, swallowed by the storm. A burst of lightning engulfed it, and a blossom of fire briefly illuminated the maelstrom before being devoured by sand. Jake exhaled, one down. Tiona's laughter, harsh, ragged, but real, cut through the storm. "See, you're learning." Jake shot her a glance. Even bruised and half-broken, she smiled like the storm was her ally, like death itself was something to mock. Another hover lunged through the storm, flanking. Its pilot opened fire wildly, plasma bolts scorching Betsy's flank. Warning klaxons wailed, panels flickered, alarms screamed of ruptures and breaches. Jake snarled and yanked the wheel, slamming Betsy into a brutal turn. The cargo crates groaned, one breaking free of its bindings. A steel container crashed into the side hatch and burst into the storm, tumbling into darkness. Jake cursed. That was a week's pay in protein paste. "Better paste than flesh," Tiona snapped. The enemy hover pulled closer, its pilot screaming through external speakers. Jake caught only fragments through the storm, but the intent was clear: surrender. Jake bared his teeth. Wrong answer. He slammed the emergency booster. Betsy howled like a demon, let loose acceleration, slamming them against their seats. The freight hover surged forward, clipping the enemy hover's flank. The collision spun the smaller vehicle sideways. For a moment, both machines were locked together, metal grinding, sparks spraying like fireworks in a nightmare carnival. Jake shoved Betsy harder, forcing his bulk against the lighter craft. The storm chose its moment, a blast of lightning, a shift in wind, and the enemy hover tipped. It tumbled into the sand, swallowed whole, vanishing with a soundless finality. Tina grinned savagely, golden eyes burning. Two down. Jake huffed, "Don't get cocky." The storm raged on, endless, eternal. Time lost meaning inside its suffocating embrace. Jake drove by instinct, memory, and the faint pulse of Tiona's guidance as she whispered directions between coughing fits. Finally, as sudden as it came, the storm thinned. The wall of dust dissolved into haze and stars glimmered faint above. They burst into open desert alive, barely. Behind them, two more dust plumes cut through the storm's remains. The Reaper had survived. Of course he had. Betsy limped engines, whining hull scorched and pitted. But she lived. And as long as Betsy lived, so did Jake. Tiona collapsed against the bulkhead, tattoos dimming once more. She was a wreck, bruised, bleeding, trembling, but her eyes still held fire. Jake glanced back at her. "That trick with the storm, you planning to explain it?" She smirked through bloodied lips. "Later, when you've earned it." Jake shook his head, chuckling despite himself. He looked out at the desert, endless and merciless, and tightened his grip on the wheel. For better or worse, he wasn't alone anymore. And that meant the Reaper's game had just changed. The desert had ways of punishing victories. Jake drove on through the fading storm, Betsy groaning with every mile. Her hull was scorched, her engine cowling, rattled with each vibration, and one of the forward stabilizers screamed whenever he pushed too hard. She was alive, but just barely. Jake knew the sound of a machine that was more stubborn than functional, and that was Betsy in spades. He checked the rear display. Dust plumes still chased them, but further back now, ghostly in the twilight haze. The Reaper had survived. He always did, but he hadn't caught them yet. That counted as a win. Tiona slumped against the bulkhead, sweat and blood matting her impossible pink hair. Her tattoos had dimmed to faint flickers, golden traces barely visible in the cabin's half-light. But her eyes, those molten gold eyes, still blazed when she caught him looking. "You're staring," she rasped. "Just wondering what kind of trouble I signed up for," Jake said. Her laugh was bitter but alive, the kind that doesn't end. By the time the desert swallowed the suns in a blaze of red and violet, Jake spotted lights on the horizon, flickering neon signs, half dead and buzzing. The smell of burnt oil and desperate commerce drifted through the vents before they even arrived. Pixie's outpost, a ramshackle collection of prefabricated modules lashed together with steel cables and bad ideas. Towers of scrap metal jutted skyward, bristling with the antennas that picked up more trouble than signals. Rusted banners proclaimed Pixie's Emporium, water wisdom and questionable morality. Jake parked Betsy at the edge of the compound. The hover gave a death rattle sigh, releasing steam and something important sounding that clanged to the ground. He patted the dashboard. "You did good, girl." The hatch hissed open, spilling heat into the cooler night. Jake hauled himself out, first rifle ready. His boots hit sand, crunching against glassy fragments from old battles. Then came Tiona. She tried to stand on her own, nearly collapsed, and Jake caught her by the arm. She scowled at him but didn't pull away. Outpost denizens gathered quickly. Desert rats, merchants, mercenaries, all with eyes like vultures scenting blood. And at their center stood the owner of this chaotic kingdom, Pixie. Pixie was barely 3 feet tall, a compact alien with 4 eyes, 2 of which blinked at odd times, and skin that shimmered in shades of green and gray. He wore a Hawaiian shirt so loud it could have signaled aircraft paired with cargo shorts that had seen better centuries. Jake Miller, Pixie's voice was nasal but powerful, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "Heard you coming 10 miles away." Sounded like someone strapped rockets to a washing machine. "Not far off," Jake muttered. Pixie's gaze dropped to Tiona. His grin faltered, replaced by something Jake had never seen from the merchant: awe. The little alien actually dropped to one knee, which didn't change his height much, but meant something all the same. "Sweet suffering saints," Pixie whispered. "Tiamaticus Alorna of the 9th variance, keeper of them." Tina, she cut in quickly, her voice weak but firm. "Just Tiona." Pixie's 4 eyes went wide. "Your mother, may she rest in quantum peace. She saved my entire clutch during the water wars. I never thought." He snapped back to business with the speed of a professional swindler. Medical now. First one's free, second one we negotiate, third one means marriage under outpost law. Tiona groaned. Of course it does. Pixie barked orders, and a swarm of helpers appeared dragging med kits that looked suspiciously stolen from 3 different species hospitals. Jake helped guide Tiona onto a makeshift cot inside the largest building, a patchwork tavern shop clinic hybrid that smelled of grease, incense, and desperation. Pixie scurried around with the precision of a pickpocket, applying patches, scanning vitals, muttering to himself. Broken ribs, dehydration, torn ligaments. You're a walking lawsuit, my dear. But those markings. Jake frowned. What about them? Pixie's upper eyes blinked. They're not just decorative, they're alive. Tiona sighed, eyes closing as another patch hissed medicine into her veins. They're memory markings. My mother gave them to me. Jake leaned on his rifle. Care to explain for those of us without degrees in alien biology? Tiona opened one eye, fixing him with molten gold fire. They're not just memories, they're access codes. My mother encoded the terraforming grid into my body. Every water cache, every station, every hidden system left before Levantis was abandoned. Jake's stomach dropped. You're telling me you're a walking water key? She's telling you she's the most wanted woman on this dust ball. Pixie said, voice solemn for once. The Reaper's been hunting her family for decades. She's the last. And if he gets her, he controls every drop. The room seemed to shrink around them. Jake thought of the rope, the dragging, the laughter of the Reaper's men. He thought of her mother torn apart under the same cruelty. Tina sat up slowly, wincing. So now you know. If you want to walk away, do it now. I won't blame you. Jake met her gaze. Something in him clenched, something stubborn, stupid, and human. Lady, I already had my chance to walk. Didn't take it then. Not taking it now. Pixie's grin returned sharp and opportunistic. Good answer. Bad survival instinct, but good answer. The outpost lights flickered, shadow stretching. A low hum vibrated through the walls, building like distant thunder. Jake felt it before he heard it, the engines of approaching hovers. Heavy, organized, familiar. Pixie cursed in 3 languages, all of them creative. He found you. Already. Jake tightened his grip on the rifle. The Reaper. The neon sign outside flickered, buzzing one last time before dying. The outpost plunged into a dim glow, the air thick with dread. A booming voice rolled over the compound, amplified and merciless. By the laws of Levantis, I, Captain Ferris Malin, claim the right of pursuit. Surrender the traitor or face execution beside her. The Reaper's convoy encircled the outpost lights, stabbing through the night like blades. Weapons bristled, gleaming with lethal promise. Tiona's hand found Jake's sleeve, trembling but fierce. Don't. The Reaper's voice continued, cold and theatrical. Or he paused, letting the silence stretch, prove her worth in the old ways. A bottle duel at dawn. The words rippled through the outpost like a curse. Merchants gasped. Drunks sobered instantly. Even Pixie's grin froze. Jake frowned. What the hell is a bottle duel? Pixie's lower eyes blinked. Hover race. Through Razor Ridge, balance a full water bottle on your head. First to spill loses. Sometimes fire. Occasionally scorpions. Always blood. Tiona groaned. He hasn't lost in 17 years. Jake rubbed his face. Of course he hasn't. The Reaper's laughter rolled like thunder. At dawn, Miller, unless you're too much of a coward. Engines roared, then receded into the desert, leaving silence heavy as a tomb. Jake sat back, rifle across his knees, listening to his own heartbeat pound against his ribs. Pixie clapped his tiny hands together. Well, this is going to be fun. The outpost never truly slept, but that night it held its breath. After the Reaper's engines faded into the desert, Pixie bustled around like a manic storm, shoving maps, crates, and dubious bottles of liquor onto a table that had once been part of a shuttle wing. Jake sat across from him, rifle across his lap, trying not to imagine the dawn creeping closer by the second. Tiona rested on the cot nearby, ribs strapped, skin glowing faintly beneath medical patches. She looked fragile, but her eyes were sharp, tracking every detail. All right, Pixie chirped, flipping open a battered ledger stuffed with more notes than sense. Bottle duel. Standard rules. You ride your hover through Razor Ridge. Keep a full bottle balanced on your head the whole way. First one to cross with water intact wins. If you spill, you lose. If you crash, you lose. If you die, well, that one's obvious. Jake frowned. Why the bottle? Tradition, Pixie said with a shrug. Water's sacred here. Proving you can carry it without spilling means you respect it. At least that's what they tell the children. In practice, it's just an excuse to murder each other with style. Jake leaned back, exhaling through clenched teeth. In this razor ridge, Pixie tapped a crude sketch. Stretch of desert where ancient terraforming weapons fuse the sand into glass. Shards like knives, ridges sharp enough to gut a hover. Storms funnel through there unpredictable. It's hell on earth. Jake stared at the map. Sounds like my kind of place. Tiona coughed, drawing his gaze. You can't win alone. Jake raised a brow. You offering to drive? Her smile was tired but sly. No, but I can navigate my markings. She lifted her arm, tattoos glowing faintly. Aren't just maps. They're predictive algorithms. I can read the terrain before it shifts. See paths no one else sees. Pixie nearly choked on his drink. Partner's choice. Jake frowned. What? It's a variant rule, Pixie explained, eyes glittering. Each duelist picks a partner. Makes the race more sporting. Or more confusing. Depends on the pair. Jake's gaze snapped to Tiona. You can barely stand. She pushed herself upright, wincing but unyielding. I can sit on a hover. I can read the land. And I can make sure you don't die in the first 5 seconds. That's suicide, Jake said flatly. It's strategy, she shot back. Her voice was low, dangerous. The Reaper expects you to choose Pixie or some local pilot. He'll have counters ready. But me, he won't see me coming. He thinks I'm broken. Jake studied her, torn between admiration and dread. He's not entirely wrong. Tiona leaned closer, golden eyes burning through the shadows. Unless you have a better plan, cowboy, you need me. Silence stretched between them, heavy with more than argument. Jake felt the weight of her defiance, her trust, her challenge. The desert had tried to break her. The Reaper had tried to erase her. And yet she sat there daring him to deny her worth. Jake exhaled a humorless laugh. Hell, you're even more stubborn than me. Pixie clapped his hands, delighted. Excellent partner's choice it is. I'll start taking bets immediately. 30-1 odds against you, Jake. Very profitable. Jake shot him a look. You're betting against me? Pixie shrugged. It's just business. Nothing personal. Besides, if you win, I'll make a fortune anyway. Nobody bets on miracles without me. Jake rubbed his temples. Why do I let you talk? The night wore on with planning that felt more like gambling. Pixie rattled off every known quirk of Razor Ridge, the crosswinds, the glass fields, the sinkholes disguised as mirages. Tiona traced paths on the map with trembling fingers, murmuring predictions that made no sense to Jake, but sounded terrifyingly precise. At some point, Jake caught her staring at him. What? You hide it well, she said softly. Hide what? The soldier. Jake froze. I'm not. Her smile cut him off. Yes, you are. You move like one. You fight like one. And you think like one, even when you're pretending not to. Jake looked away, jaw tightening. Memories pressed in the battlefield smoke. The screams, the orders, he hadn't followed the lives that had ended because of it. He drowned them in silence. Tiona's hand brushed his arm, light tentative. Your past doesn't matter to me, only what you do now. Jake swallowed hard, forcing the ghost back down. What I do now is try not to get killed for someone else's vendetta. Not someone else's, Tiona said, her voice steel wrapped in silk. Ours. You made it yours the moment you didn't leave me in the sand. He met her gaze again. For once, he didn't look away. Pixie cleared his throat, loudly breaking the moment. Well, if we're done with the mating ritual, perhaps we should discuss the minor issue of the Reaper's murder squad. Jake groaned. What now? Pixie spread his forearms theatrically. I've put out some calls. The rust rats are in cyber-enhanced rodents with a grudge. Betty barter too because the Reaper owes her water. And those cultists from Platform 9 who worship a vending machine. All reliable mostly, somewhat, occasionally. Jake pinched the bridge of his nose. You're building me an army of clowns. Circus army, Pixie corrected. There's a difference. Despite himself, Jake laughed. It came out rough, surprised, but real. Tina's lips curved, too faint but fierce. Sometimes a circus is exactly what you need. The hours slipped by. The outpost hummed with nervous energy, merchants whispering, gamblers exchanging water for odds, and rumors spreading like wildfire. Dawn crept closer, painting the desert sky with bruised shades of purple and red. Jake sat with Betsy, hands on her battered hull, listening to the thrum of her heart. "We've got one more fight in us, girl. Just one." Tina joined him, quietly leaning against the hover. "She's beautiful. Stubborn." "Yeah," Jake said softly. "She is." Tiona's gaze lingered on him. "Reminds me of her pilot." Jake chuckled, shaking his head. "Careful, princess. Flattery like that might get you in trouble." She smirked. "Good. Trouble is exactly what I'm looking for." And as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Jake realized he wasn't just racing to survive. He was racing for her. For both of them. The outpost grew quieter as night deepened. Even in a place that thrived on desperation and barter, there were moments when everyone recognized the shadow of death hanging over the camp. Tomorrow was a bottle duel, and that meant blood. No one wanted to gamble too loudly in the face of it. Jake sat outside Betsy, cross-legged on a crate, polishing the worn plasma rifle across his lap. The weapon's familiar weight was the only comfort he trusted. The desert air cooled with the twin moons overhead, though the ground still radiated heat like banked coals. His shadow stretched long and jagged in the pale light. Inside the hangar, Tiona stirred. She emerged with stiff movements, bandages tight around her ribs, skin gleaming faintly under the glow of her tattoos. Each step looked painful, but she carried herself like she'd never allow the pain to matter. "You should be resting," Jake said without looking up. She lowered herself onto the crate beside him, exhaling a laugh that caught on bruised ribs. "Rest is for people who expect to live through tomorrow." Jake glanced at her, the corner of his mouth tugging upward despite himself. Optimistic as always. She tilted her head, studying him. "You polish that rifle like it's going to win you the duel." "It won't," Jake admitted, "but it might get me through the part before the duel." Silence fell between them, the kind filled with unspoken thoughts. Jake focused on the rifle, on the rhythm of cleaning the scrape of cloth against metal. Tiona's eyes wandered to the horizon, where the faint glow of Reaper's campfires flickered like malevolent stars. Finally, she spoke. "You know why he hates me? Why he won't rest until I'm dead?" Jake leaned back, rifle across his knees. "Because you're a thorn in his side." Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "Because my mother scarred him. Literally, took his eye, half his face, the first time she stood against him. She believed water belonged to everyone. He believed power belonged to him. They fought for years. She won more than once. But eventually he killed my aunt, destroyed our family, and hunted us to extinction." Her voice wavered, but she forced it steady. "I'm the last, and he doesn't just want me dead. He wants me erased, forgotten." Jake stared at her, the weight of her words pressing against his chest. He'd thought he was just helping a stranger, another victim in a desert full of them. But she wasn't just anyone. She was the last spark of a fire the Reaper had spent decades trying to smother. "You don't have to carry it alone," he said quietly. Her golden eyes snapped to his, fierce and bright. "I've carried it alone my whole life. Why should that change now?" Jake met her gaze steady. "Because you're not alone anymore." Something flickered across her face. Anger, defiance, disbelief. But beneath it, a crack in the armor. A spark of hope she tried to bury. She looked away, first back to the horizon. "Hope is dangerous," she murmured. "So is giving up," Jake countered. Pixie appeared, then arms full of junk that might once have been food, or ammunition, or both. "Well," he chirped far too loudly for the solemn mood. "I've made arrangements. Bribes here, favors there, promises I can't possibly keep. The usual. We might actually have a chance tomorrow, assuming none of my allies betray us before breakfast." Jake gave him a flat look. "You're supposed to make me feel better." Pixie grinned, unrepentant. "I'm supposed to make money. Everything else is just a side effect." Tiona groaned, leaning back against the crate. "Why do we keep him around?" Jake smirked, comic relief. Pixie waggled his eyebrows. "And because you love me." He scuttled off before either of them could respond. The silence that followed felt different, lighter somehow, threaded with something unspoken. Tiona shifted closer, her shoulder brushing Jake's. The warmth of her skin bled through the fabric of his sleeve. "You're insane," she said softly. "Been told that a lot," Jake replied. You had no reason to save me, no reason to stay, yet here you are. Jake exhaled slowly. Maybe I just don't like bullies. Maybe I don't like watching good people dragged into the dirt. Good, she echoed, almost amused. You don't even know me. He turned to her, then really looking at her. I know enough. I know you didn't break even after 40 miles of rope and sand. I know you're willing to die for something bigger than yourself. That's more than I can say for most. Her breath caught. For a moment, she seemed ready to argue, but the words never came. Instead, she leaned closer, her eyes searching his, as if weighing something heavier than words. Jake's heart hammered in his chest, louder than the wind, louder than the distant rumble of hovers. He didn't know who moved first. Maybe both. But suddenly, her lips were on his soft and electric tasting of dust and fire and defiance. The kiss was brief, fragile, yet fierce enough to burn away the weight of the desert for one impossible heartbeat. When they pulled apart, Tiona laughed breathless. That was stupid. Jake managed a crooked grin. I was going to say nice, but stupid works too. Her hand lingered against his cheek, her golden eyes softer now. If we die tomorrow, when we die tomorrow, I wanted you to know. Jake shook his head. We're not dying tomorrow. She smirked. Liar. Yeah, he admitted, but I'm a stubborn liar. From the shadows, Pixie's voice piped up. Well, wasn't that touching? That'll be 3 gallons for the photo I just took. Pixie, they shouted in unison. He raised 4 hands innocently, a camera dangling from one. Memories are expensive. Besides, it'll be great propaganda when you win. Jake leveled his rifle at him. Delete it. Pixie skipped away humming, never. Despite the absurdity, the tension broke. Jake and Tiona shared a look, half exasperation, half amusement. For a fleeting moment, the desert felt less cruel. But when the laughter faded, reality returned. The dawn loomed, the duel awaited. Jake tightened his grip on the rifle, staring into the night. Tomorrow it ends. Tina touched his arm. No, she whispered. Tomorrow it begins. Dawn cracked over Levantis like a blade. The sky ignited in violent oranges and toxic purples, the twin suns dragging light across a wasteland that glittered with shards of fused glass. Razor Ridge, a scar left by old wars where sand had melted into jagged mirrors that cut hovers to ribbons. It was no race course. It was a graveyard. Jake stood beside Betsy, adjusting the straps of his battered harness. The hover still bore scorch marks from the storm, half her panels loose, one engine coughing like a smoker, but she was alive. Stubborn, like her pilot. Tiona climbed up beside him, steady despite the bandages binding her ribs. Her tattoos glowed faintly in the rising light, golden lines tracing across purple skin. She carried no weapon, no armor, only defiance, and the promise that she could see what he could not. You sure about this? Jake asked quietly. Her golden eyes locked on his. You'll need me. Jake smirked. Hell, that's what I was afraid of. Across the ridge, the Reaper's fortress hover loomed like a predator waiting to pounce, sleek armored bristling with weapons. The blood-red scorpion on its prow gleamed fresh and cruel in the dawn. Ferris Malin, the Reaper, stood atop it for all to see. His half-metal face caught the light servos, whining as he smiled. Around him, a ring of his men waited hover crews, mercenaries, killers. Their formation was perfect, their confidence absolute. The crowd gathered along the ridge, merchants, gamblers, wanderers, cultists, and every soul desperate enough to bet on death. Water changed hands in barrel skins and bottles. Odds shouted through the chaos. Bets were laid on Jake's corpse being dragged back before noon. Pixie darted between them, forearms scribbling notes and collecting wagers. 30-1 against Miller Place. Your bets. Payoffs guaranteed unless you all die first. Jake mounted Betsy, hands firm on the controls. Tiona slid into the seat behind him, her hands bracing against his shoulders, her body heat pressing close. She leaned in, her voice low. Trust me. Jake exhaled. Already do. The Reaper's voice boomed across the ridge, amplified to shake stone. By the laws of Levantis, we race the bottle duel. At dawn through Razor Ridge with water as our crown winner takes life. Loser takes dust. He lifted a jug of water, crystalline and impossible in this desert, and poured it into 2 bottles. One for himself, one for Jake. His lieutenants balanced the bottles on their leaders' heads. The crowd roared, chanting for blood. Jake felt the weight settle on his skull heavy despite its small size. Every drop was a reminder water meant life. Spilling it meant shame, defeat, and death. Gloria chimed in his earpiece, smug as ever. Balancing fragile containers of liquid during high-speed hover maneuvers reduces survival chances to approximately zero. Good to know, Jake muttered. Let's make it negative. Engines roared. Betsy snarled. The Reaper's fortress hover growled like a monster. The signal fired, and the desert exploded. They launched into Razor Ridge sand and glass, spraying and blinding arcs. Betsy surged forward with surprising agility, her old war engines straining, screaming but alive. The bottle wobbled precariously on Jake's head, each shift of inertia a test of balance and nerve. The Reaper pulled ahead immediately, his machine sleeker, faster, built for domination. Plasma fire spat from his lieutenants, lancing the ground around Betsy. Tiona's hands tightened on Jake's shoulders. F now. Jake yanked the controls, Betsy skidding across a glassy ridge just as plasma bolts shattered where they'd been. The hover's hull screamed, sparks flying, but the bottle steadied. Good call, Jake grunted. She smirked behind him. Told you. They tore through the first stretch, mirrored shards rising like fangs around them. Light refracted into 1,000 spears, dazzling, blinding. The Reaper used it to his advantage, weaving effortlessly, bottle steady as stone. Jake fought every second to keep balance muscles screaming, sweat pouring. But Tiona whispered directions: veer right. Shard collapsing. Hold steady. Brace. Each word cut through the chaos like a compass. The crowd roared above screams carrying on the wind. Wagers shouted odds, shifting lives traded for water in the stands. At the second turn, the Reaper made his move. He veered close, his hover slamming against Betsy's flank. Metal shrieked, bottles swayed. Jake clenched his teeth, holding steady, refusing to spill. He's trying to break us. He doesn't know you, Tiona hissed. Jake bared his teeth. Good. Betsy slammed back. Old war plating met sleek steel. The Reaper laughed, amplified, cruel. You're out of your depth, Miller. Jake growled. Story of my life. They burst into the ridge's heart, a canyon of glass spires where the storm funneled wind into shrieking banshees. Hover stabilizers bucked, bottles tilted. Pilots fought not just each other, but the ridge itself. The Reaper surged ahead, his hover cutting impossible arcs. Jake struggled to keep pace. Tiona's tattoos blazed, guiding him through paths invisible to human eyes. Third turn, she shouted. Sixth obstacle, he'll take the inside line, force him outside. Jake nodded, pushing Betsy harder, skimming a spire close enough to shear paint. He slid into the line Tiona predicted, cutting the Reaper's path. The Reaper cursed, forced wide, his bottle tilted dangerously. The crowd gasped. But he steadied, laughing, roaring, You can't beat me. Maybe not, Jake muttered, but we can. The circus army arrived. From the ridge, Betty Barter's comedy troupe hurled moonshine bombs into the fray, exploding in fiery blossoms that disoriented the Reaper's lieutenants. Rust rats scurried onto enemy hovers, cybernetic claws tearing into wiring, squeaking war cries. Cultists rolled vending machines into the path, chanting binary prayers. Chaos erupted. Plasma fire lit the canyon. Explosions rocked the ridge. The Reaper's men scattered, some crashing into spires, others dragged down by rats or swallowed by fire. Jake and Tiona pushed through the chaos, Betsy roaring, bottle somehow unbroken. Then the Reaper himself turned full fury on them. His cannon roared bolts, scorching the path ahead. Betsy jolted, alarmed, screaming. The bottle wobbled, nearly tipping. Jake clenched his jaw. We're not dying here. Tiona's hands flared, golden tattoos burning like suns. She pressed her palm to the hover's console. Energy pulsed through Betsy, stabilizing her, steadying the bottle. Jake's eyes widened. What the hell? My mother's gift, Tiona whispered. Old tech. Quantum markers. And you just gave me the fight to use them. The ridge itself answered. Sand shifted. Glass sang. Buried mechanisms stirred, long forgotten, long dormant. The terraforming grid awoke. Geysers of water erupted across the ridge, blasting into the sky. The crowd screamed. The desert roared. The Reaper's hover swerved, slammed by fountains of life. His bottle teetered. His mechanical eye whirred frantically. Jake grinned, wild and fierce. Looks like Levantis just picked a side. They surged past him, Betsy flying like she was young again, driven by storm fire, and something greater than survival. The finish line loomed two jagged spires, the bottle duel's end. Jake leaned forward. Hold on. Tiona whispered, fierce and certain, always. Betsy shot through the spires, bottle balanced intact. The crowd erupted. The Reaper crossed seconds later, his bottle cracked, spilling precious drops across the sand. He roared fury, shaking the ridge. Jake stood tall on Betsy's deck, bottle still whole. The outlaw, the soldier, the stubborn fool who didn't know when to quit. The crowd roared his name. Water changed hands in torrents. Levantis had witnessed something impossible, but it wasn't over. Tiona raised her hands, tattoos blazing brighter than the sun's. She slammed her palms against the ground. The desert obeyed. The terraforming grid surged to full power. Water cascaded, rivers carving through sand. The ridge trembled, blooming into green shoots, life bursting where death had ruled. The Reaper fell to his knees, water soaking his boots, his empire dissolving before his eyes. No, he howled. I earned this. Tiona stood radiant, terrible, glorious. You stole it. Now it returns to those who need it. Jake leveled his rifle. Desert justice, Captain. You know how it works. The crowd swarmed. They didn't kill him. They bound him, shamed him, strapped the honor pot around his neck, branding him with humiliation worse than death. Ferrus Malin the Reaper was undone. Levantis had awakened. The roar of the crowd still rang through Razor Ridge long after the Reaper had been bound. Jake stood atop Betsy's battered deck chest, heaving bottles still balanced on his head, as if defying the universe itself. Sweat and blood streaked his face. His hands shook from adrenaline, but his eyes never left Tiona. She glowed like a living beacon, tattoos blazing with the raw light of ancient terraforming code, her hair streaming pink fire in the desert wind. The desert was no longer silent. Water thundered down from geysers. Rivers carved channels where none had been for centuries. Green tendrils sprouted almost instantly, mutated flora fed by buried tech eager to fulfill its abandoned purpose. Levantis was waking up. The Reaper screamed, thrashing against the hands of the mob. His bottle shattered, his reputation bleeding away with every spilled drop. His men, once so disciplined, now faltered. Some fled, some threw down their arms, and some knelt before the tide of change. Betty Barter herself strode forward, scarred arms crossed her comedy troupe at her heels. She shoved the heavy honor pot into place, clamping it around Ferrus Malin's neck. The cast iron relic gleamed with inscriptions of every dishonored soul before him. The crowd jeered as the pot clanged each step, marking his fall. Desert justice, Betty declared, her voice carrying over the roar of water. Not death, shame. He'll live with it. 1 gallon a day, no more. The crowd chanted approval. 1 gallon, 1 gallon. Pixie perched atop a crate like a smug gargoyle, beamed at the chaos. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. You can't buy drama like this. His 4 eyes sparkled, already calculating how much water he'd make selling was there. Souvenirs by nightfall. Jake dropped down from Betsy's knees, nearly buckling as the adrenaline drained from him. Tiona caught his arm, steadying him despite her own pain. Their gazes locked, and for once neither spoke. There were no words for what they had just survived. Finally, Jake exhaled a ragged laugh. Well, that was stupid. Tina smiled, weary and radiant, but effective. Pixie scampered over, wringing his hands. My dear champions, heroes of Levantis, possibly soon to be martyrs, but mostly winners. Jake glared down at him. You bet against me, didn't you? Pixie's grin widened. Of course. 30-to-1 odds, which means I profit both ways. But since you survived, he held up a ledger, fat with water credits. I've never been richer, and neither technically have you. Jake shook his head. You're unbelievable. Thank you, Pixie said brightly. The celebration was chaotic, unplanned, and inevitable. As water flowed freely for the first time in generations, people knelt in the mud, laughing, crying, scooping handfuls of liquid life as though it might vanish. Merchants embraced strangers. Children splashed in puddles. Even the hardened mercenaries of the outpost dropped their weapons to drink. For one night, Levantis forgot its divisions. Jake found himself seated at a long table cobbled together from scrap metal, a mug of something halfway between liquor and solvent in his hand. Tiona sat beside him, bandaged and weary, but smiling faintly as locals whispered reverent greetings to her. Pixie played master of ceremonies, retelling the duel with ever-growing exaggeration. And then our gallant Jake Miller leapt a canyon 50 feet wide with his bottle balanced perfectly. Not a drop spilled. His hover sang hymns. I swear it, and angels wept. Jake groaned, Pixie, it was 15 feet, maybe. And Betsy does not sing. Don't ruin the legend, Pixie scolded. Tina chuckled, eyes shining. Let him. My mother used to say stories are stronger than weapons. Jake leaned closer. You think this story will last? She held his gaze. It has to. The next days were chaos wrapped in opportunity. With the Reaper disgraced, his lieutenants scattered. Settlements once starved of water suddenly found rivers filling their basins. Crops sprouted where only dust had ruled. For the first time in decades, Levantis saw green. Jake, Tiona, and Pixie stood at the heart of it, whether they wanted to or not. You're leaders now, Betty informed them bluntly one morning, arms crossed. Heroes don't get to walk away. Not when the whole damn planet's watching. Jake scowled. I'm a freight runner, not a politician. Congratulations, Betty said dryly. You just got promoted. Tiona shouldered the burden naturally, her markings glowing brighter, as she accessed the ancient systems guiding water distribution, balancing the grid. But she insisted Jake stand beside her, his grit and pragmatism tempering her idealism. And Pixie declared himself Minister of Commerce and Entertainment, a role no one had authorized but everyone accepted because somehow it worked. Months blurred into years. Levantis transformed. The terraforming grid spread life across the wastes, carving rivers, feeding reservoirs, coaxing green from sand. Settlements grew into towns. Towns grew into cities. At the center of it all stood New Oasis, built atop the ruins of the Reaper's fortress. Where once the scorpion insignia loomed, now a fountain poured clear water into open basins, free for all. Above it, a sign proclaimed, water is life. Share it. Jake never got used to being called governor. He hated the title, refused to wear anything fancier than his old dust-stained gear, and still swore at Gloria every morning. But he stayed because Tiona stayed. And because every time he saw a child splashing in clean water, he remembered what the desert used to be. 15 years later, the desert had changed, but some things remained stubbornly the same. Emma Miller, though no one called her that, revved the engine of her hover pink hair streaked with glowing purple highlights, whipping in the wind. Everyone called her Storm, because wherever she went, chaos followed. She sped through fields of glowing trees that hummed faintly with engineered bioluminescence, dodging water caravans and half-built markets. She whooped with joy, the wind tearing laughter from her throat. Behind her, Betty Barter now, the matriarch of a comedy empire spanning 3 platforms, shouted after her. Storm, tell your parents they still owe me for last week's incident. What incident? Storm yelled back, grinning. The one where your dad drove through my stage. Storm cranked her music louder, her father's ancient country songs remixed with her mother's quantum harmonics. It shouldn't have worked, but like everything in their family, it did. She swerved around Redemption Corner, waving at Ferris Malin, yes, the Reaper himself, who now taught water conservation to children, the honor pot still clanging at his neck. He scowled like a grumpy grandpa, but waved anyway. Stay hydrated, Storm, he bellowed. Always Ferris, she called back. Storm eventually slowed at the memorial where the duel had ended. Statues rose from the ground, Jake rifle slung, looking stubborn and heroic. Tiona radiant, her markings blazing. And Pixie caught mid-pocket pick, even in bronze. Her parents sat their hovers parked side by side, sharing a canteen, still bickering about Earth movies. I'm telling you, Tiona argued the shark was the hero. Why else name the movie after him? Jaws is not about a heroic shark, Jake shot back. Storm rolled her eyes. Old people. She killed her engine and hopped down. Pixie says you're looking for me. Jake's grin carried the same stubbornness as ever. We found something. Her heart skipped. Found what? Tiona's tattoos pulsed a serious rhythm Storm knew too well. A signal. From beyond the Deadlands. Someone's out there. Someone who knows about the variants. Jake stood the stance Storm had copied since childhood. And we're going to check it out. Storm's grin matched his. When do we leave? Her mother arched a brow. This is dangerous, little Storm. Everything's dangerous, Storm. Shot back. That's what makes it fun. Besides, you need me. I already packed. Jake and Tiona shared a look, half pride, half resignation. She's got your recklessness, Tiona said. She's got your stubbornness, Jake countered. I've got both, Storm declared proudly. Plus Uncle Pixie's business sense. Face it, I'm overqualified. In the distance, something howled. Sandworms or worse. It didn't matter. Jake tossed her the keys. You drive. Gloria's voice, older but still sarcastic, boomed from the hover. Calculating odds of survival. Error, insufficient data. This family defies statistics. They mounted up 3 generations of chaos, riding into another sunrise. Mom Storm called out as the engines growled, "What's past the deadland?" Tina smiled, the same fierce smile that had once awakened Levantis. No idea. But whatever it is, it's about to meet us. Jake chuckled, patting Betsy's console. Poor thing doesn't stand a chance. Storm revved the engine, hair blazing in the light of dawn. Then let's go show it what stupid heroics really look like. The desert sang, water flowed, and Levantis thrived. And somewhere beyond the horizon, adventure waited, with teeth bared and odds stacked against them, which was exactly how the Miller family liked it.
The pettiness, a reflection of the emptiness. Hilarious, you think you're worth my time, you're delirious. Mysterious, because you